I get asked a lot about cymbal hums or tones, frequencies that come out in a cymbal sound that are maybe less than ideal. Many people will send cymbals to our company for modifications, and a lot of times they're saying, it's got this hum, it's got this gnarly frequency that I really don't like. Can you please notch that? And in this video, I figured we would just dive in and use this original cymbal that I'm currently making as a great example because it's got a super, super gnarly sounding hum in it. Yeah, so I have it circled on this cymbal where the gnarly tone is coming from. It's just this wah wah kind of ugly sound, not very pleasant. It's not buried in the mix, so it's really just on top, the loudest thing you hear when you hit in that zone. And it's gnarly. You can see even I set up the camera in a way that if you look at the profile of the cymbal, this cymbal is a little bit twisted, so it doesn't have a flat profile. I was using kind of an experimental technique to shape this cymbal, utilizing my tire hammer and hand hammering and kind of going back and forth in this way that I hadn't tried before. So this cymbal's got a twist to it. It's got a real like kind of nasty shape in a way that it's like it hooks right around here, and then it's got kind of a trough and then a peak and then another trough and then a peak at the bell. So it's a really wild shaped cymbal. A cymbal is going to have tons of frequencies, tons of tones, and ideally we want those tones to work together in some sort of cohesive way to create a certain vibe, whether it's trashy, dark, bright, shimmery, dry, all the terms we throw around. We're really talking in essence about frequencies, tones, response, and how they all blend together to make for a good cymbal. So when we have tones like this, even as bad as this tone is, and it's still going. Even as bad as that tone is, I'm not going to sit here and say that is purely an awful thing and should never be in any cymbal ever. Because when we build in certain zones to our cymbals as independent cymbalsmiths, we can actually create intrigue and we can actually create dimension to the sound. We can make the cymbal wide and diverse, and that you can get a bunch of different sounds out of it depending on where you play it. The thing about that note is it's really bad when you hit right on it, but that same tone, when I play the bell and when I play other parts of the cymbal, comes in kind of underneath the sound and sort of builds in a certain character to the sound elsewhere that I don't hate. Right there on the bell, I can hear that, but it's so buried in the mix. And it almost comes up and sort of supports the sound of the bell and gives it sort of extra vibe, extra interest, extra intrigue. So with that, this kind of comes down to my entire concept when we talk about hums, is that I don't like to think of them as like purely a bad thing and purely a thing that should never be in any cymbal. They can be in a cymbal in an intentional way that gives you an interesting cymbal to play. This cymbal right here is, I wouldn't necessarily say that this particular tone is a good one, and therefore I am going to be correcting it. But with that, this kind of comes down to my concept, that my concept is that I don't hate hums, because a cymbal is always going to be full of hums, or tones, frequencies, notes, whatever you want to say. So we'll play some cymbals, and it's like they sing at us, like the sound billows up and opens really big, and they're singing at us. We have these notes, and it's like almost creating a chorus. The chorus could be dissonant, it could be consonant, it could be harmonious, or it can be it can give you different feelings emotionally. Like it can have a dark, growly, angry tone, or this bright kind of singing, happy tone. And so a cymbal that we really try to say, like no tones, no notes, we're really talking about a cymbal that's going to be more of a vibe. Cymbals that have notes that work harmoniously are going to be more of a voice. The vibe cymbals are usually going to be fairly complex and maybe a little bit trashy, because those vibe cymbals where you really scoop out all of the clear tones tend to have the mid-range kind of scooped, and so you have low frequencies and high frequencies. And so you get this you almost get this kind of, one way of saying it would actually be that you have so many tones that it's so complex that there's no way you can pick out any clear tone. A voice, on the other hand, is going to have notes that you can pay attention to and hear, and they're going to work in a harmonious way. So this is a cymbal where I kind of want to make it a little bit more of a voice type cymbal. I want it to be, I'm not looking for trashy and kind of the Bill Stewart, umbrella, old K kind of sound. I'm wanting something that's going to maybe sing at me a little bit and have a little bit more of an open sound. So I want to work with this hum, I want to blend it, but I don't want to eliminate it. If, on the other hand, I was like, no, this is going to be a vibe cymbal, what I would do is I would go in and I would do some pretty heavy hammering and get some crazy topography in there, which in essence would scoop out a lot of the mid-range, leave me with this low, dark, growly, kind of roaring crowd, dragon's breath thing, and then this high frequency, dry stick attack that would be pretty clear because there wouldn't be any kind of mid-range there to muddy it up. All right, so we're in the hammering room, and as I inspected the cymbal, I noticed the problem with the twist and why it's twisting and probably why it's humming in this zone here. So when I look at the bell, it's gonna be very hard for you to see, but just trust me on this. This bell is kind of sunk on this half of the cymbal, which is the half that has the hum. So what's happening is it's twisted and it's pulling up on this side with the profile, but it's dipping on this side. So the idea, at least first, this is always it's the art of kind of trial and error with cymbals. You just try stuff, see where it lands. It takes you a certain way. There's really not like set formulas for exactly how to fix a hum in a cymbal. But for me, I'm looking at this and going, okay, this is probably the culprit. The bell is sort of sunk in on this side, meaning that this side of the cymbal needs to be built up. I could do that in numerous ways, but what I'm going to do is hammer the bottom in on this mark that I made here all the way over to the end over here, build that up, and as that builds up, the hope is that we can kind of allow the profile to sink on this side, get a more level profile, not perfect, but more level, and then we're going to see how that hum is responding. So let's hammer. Wow. So literally just there, as I looked at the cymbal in the profile, it's like even that little bit that I just did has done a lot to kind of help level out the bell and kind of push up that side. So trial and error, let's check it out. Let's see what's happening to that zone that had the hum. Okay, that did it. That little bit of work did it, to me at least. There's an aspect where once we hammer, we've kind of made the metal seize up, so it needs to open up. But that area that was going wow, 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 is now, that pitch is higher. It's much higher, and that note is gone. I have a little bit of a different pitch, which means I need to maybe go in and just do like a touch more. And I'm seeing a part of the shape that needs a touch more work, so let's keep going with this. Let's see what happens. I promise I didn't plan this. That's kind of done what it's needed to do to correct the shape. I'm not really having the same issue that I was seeing, at least in that profile curvature and the flow of that shape. Yeah, it's much more uniform now, and my bell is sitting nice and level. So let's check it out a little bit more. I do still see, so now it's twisting kind of in a different way. It's kind of built up on this side where it was built up on this side. So we've got a profile that's starting to look better, but I do have one part of it still wanting to kind of warp and lift. So I have my trusty little table over here, and if it does that versus if it rattles, I know that I'm not sitting, it's not sitting perfectly level. So sometimes that can be as easy as bending. So bending down at the point where it's wanting to lift, getting kind of a little bit of stretch to that place. That's a little better, actually. It's still there, but it's a little better. And it's looking a little better. And I still have some other things about it I'm not loving. So let's just go in, and I'm just going to get into what I call well, a lot of people call it this, the flow state, where you're just kind of reacting to what you're seeing. I've got my light set up here in my hammer room. It might not be the best for the video, but it's great for the work that I do. It's like I have this light placed very particularly so I can see reflections off of the metal, and I can see the areas that are bumped and the areas that are dipped, and so I can kind of use that to respond to what I'm seeing with the hammering and how the hammering is sort of moving the metal around and getting it into more of the shape that I'm looking to have. There we go. There we go. That's okay. All right. Okay. Now we got something else coming up. Okay, so now, as I've worked that shape, kind of, I went out near the edge because it was kind of like doing this sort of out at the edge, so I wanted to build that out at the very edge. So as I've done the work that I've done, now I've kind of overcompensated a little bit. So now my high spot is where my low spot was. So now I got to go back and go, okay, so I need to push the other side out a little bit, or maybe go on top and build it up. There's pushing, there's growing, there's all kinds of things that I've talked about in many other videos, but I'm going to do just the tiniest bit of work to the opposite side now Not as much as I did, because then I'm just going to seesaw it back the other direction. I'll just be doing this over and over. And as I'm doing that, the shape is getting taller, 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 taller. So now I'm trying to work with subtlety, work with just doing a little bit. Otherwise, I risk turning the cymbal into something completely different than what I'm intending it to be. Nice. All right, now, so to this point, I've only hammered the bottom. And so what I'm doing is, as I'm hammering the underside, I'm kind of relaxing the stiffness that it has. Giving it more of a soft feel, which feel is another aspect that we can talk about with cymbals. It's hugely important. Beyond sound, if theoretically it was possible to make two cymbals sound exactly the same, but have different feels, then it would be a very different feeling that you would get as the player playing it, because one of them would have this give. You could kind of play into the cymbal a little bit. The other one would be really just like throwing the stick back at you, would be stiff. In general, we are dealing with a sound difference with different stiffnesses, but theoretically, if you could make them sound identical with two different feels, it would still have a much different response for you sitting behind the kit playing it. So now it's going to be a little bit more loose. It's going to have more of a wobble to the sound. You know, oftentimes I'll take a cymbal like this. It's like, okay, the hums aren't there. They're blended a little bit more. So let's wait. Let's leave it a day and see what happens when we come back to it tomorrow. And I think that might be what I do with this one. The shape is not perfect. It's not perfectly flat, but also I have to take it back to the lathe to work over top of this hammering. I'm not wanting a cymbal that's been over hammered. So I can think, well, it's a little bit slumped and a little bit twisted, but I can deal with that on the lathe. I don't have to deal with that with just hammering. I put it on my, my table. I definitely have some spots that, like here and here. So two spots opposite to each other. That's very common as well. Two spots are wanting to kind of both be lifted up. So I can bend down at those points and kind of try to relax it into a flatter shape, which that did a little bit, just that there. I think it's going to need a little bit of top hammering though. Kind of anticipating that. So I'm going to go ahead and do a round, and then we'll leave this be, let it sit, come back to it, revisit it, and then finalize it. All right, that's as good enough place as any to leave it. I do want to check one thing first. I'm going to flip the cymbal inside out. I like to flip cymbals inside out like this so that I can see what's the tendency of the metal when it's inverted. A lot of times that can be a very enlightening thing to do, because we can have a shape that looks semi there, then we flip it inside out and we go, oh wow, it's wanting to kind of lump one place here, and it's just being kind of held in an odd space. And so I can kind of see too that my bell is also wanting to be a little bit weird when it's inverted. So I can come in and bend against the invert, against the bridge, against the flipped cymbal, and I can kind of relax it into place, kind of see where is it sitting. Sometimes I'll put it on the floor of my shop, which you can't see, and I'll press, and wow, that's interesting. You can't see, but when I press on the ground, this area is wanting to dip in, which means I've kind of overcorrected on the opposite side. Or sorry, I've overcorrected on the top, so it's wanting to kind of be loose, which that can cause there to be sort of this thumpy tendency up near the bell, or maybe the bell isn't as separated as it could be. It's a little bit too integrated, and the body of the cymbal is activating a little bit too much. So when that happens, I'll usually go in, take a different hammer, maybe give myself a small little ring around the top near the bell to reinforce that just ever so slightly. I don't want to seesaw it back the other direction to where then it's dipping on the top when it's inverted correctly. But this is kind of how I'm going back and forth, trying to like fine tune, dial in the cymbal to be what I want it to be. So this is the last thing I'm going to do, and then we're going to leave it and see how it rests. So that little bit of work just there has given it just enough strength to not want to dip the opposite way. So there we go. All right, cool. So one final little play test to show you where it's sitting before it rests. Yeah, that's nice. We're in a different room, but it does sound a lot drier and a lot different than it did in the beginning. The area that I'm hitting, where that tone really popped out, is holding pretty firm. It's not, that sound is not coming up too much to kind of like get in your face and be way sitting out on top of the mix of the cymbal. I've also not tried to perfectly dial it all out. I'm hearing differences that are going to manifest themselves once it's rested. But it's a handmade cymbal. I want it to have different zones. I want it to be a little bit unique. I'm looking for a voice kind of cymbal, so I want tones to come out that when it rests creates that kind of harmonious chorus of tones. So we'll check back in a day or so, see how it's going, and then finish this thing up.